My name is Dara Connelly. I'm 30 years old. And on the day I was supposed to get married, I found my father standing in a reception hall holding a place card with his own name on it, looking for a table that no longer existed. Not for him, anyway. Someone had moved my parents while I was in the bridal suite, moved them from table 1, front and center, where the families of the bride and groom belong, to table 16. The last table, pressed against the wall beside the catering station, where the servers came in and out with full trays and left with empty ones, and where the overhead light was a utility bulb instead of a chandelier, because nobody had bothered to extend the decor that far back. The table had 4 mismatched chairs. 2 of them were the padded folding kind that venues use when they've run out of the real ones. My parents had saved $11,000 over 14 years for this wedding. That money was in the catering contract. It was on every plate, in every glass, in the centerpieces on every table in that room, including the tables where people were deciding my parents weren't important enough to sit near the front. When I found my husband-to-be and told him what I'd found, he looked at me the way a man looks when he already knew and was hoping you wouldn't notice until it was too late to matter. 20 minutes later, I heard him through a door that wasn't fully closed. And then I walked to the microphone. This is what happened before that, and after it, and what it cost, and what it gave back. I grew up in Clover Falls, Indiana. Population just under 6,000. High, the kind of number that doesn't quite round up to a town but is too proud to call itself a village. My father, Ray Connelly, worked maintenance for the county school district for 31 years. Boilers, electrical, plumbing, roof patches in February when nobody else wanted to be up there. The kind of work that keeps buildings standing and goes completely unnoticed until it stops. My mother, June, was a home health aide. She drove to people's houses, mostly elderly, mostly alone, mostly frightened about what their bodies were doing. And she helped them with the things they could no longer do for themselves. She did this 5 days a week, sometimes 6, for 23 years. She made $17 an hour and treated every person in her care like they were family. We were not wealthy. I want to say that simply and without apology, because the story I'm about to tell you requires you to understand it clearly. We were not wealthy, and we were not pretending to be. We had a house on Griswold Street that my parents owned outright, paid off the year I turned 18, which my father treated as a personal achievement on the level of something genuinely historic. We had a used car that ran reliably, and a vegetable garden that actually produced food, and a kitchen table where homework happened every night from 2nd grade through senior year. What we had in that house was not money, it was consistency. My parents showed up. That's the only way I know how to say it. They showed up for the boring things and the hard things and the in-between things. My father came to every science fair and every school play and every single one of the 17 soccer games in the one season I played soccer before deciding I was terrible at it. My mother packed lunches until I was old enough to be embarrassed about it. And then she packed them anyway and put them in a bag I could carry without anyone seeing the cartoon on the outside. These are not grand gestures. They are the texture of a childhood where you are known and wanted. I understand now, having moved in the world I've been in for the last several years, how rare that actually is. I met Owen Haskell at a fundraiser for the Children's Hospital, where I worked as a pediatric nurse. He was there with his mother, Pamela, who sat on the hospital's development board and attended every gala with the energy of a woman who considered philanthropy a competitive sport. Owen was 32, ran the family's commercial property management company, and had the kind of easy confidence that comes from never having had a reason to doubt yourself. He was charming in the specific way that well-resourced men can be charming, attentive, generous with his time, genuinely funny in small doses. He asked smart questions and remembered the answers. He called when he said he would. On our 4th date, He drove 40 minutes out of his way to pick me up from a late shift because my car was in the shop, and he brought coffee, and he didn't make a thing of it. I noticed the Haskell family dynamic early. You'd have to be blind to miss it. Owen's mother, Pamela, ran the social architecture of the family the way air traffic control runs an airport. Nothing moved without her knowing about it, and any deviation from her preferred routing created immediate turbulence. His father, Gerald, was a quiet man who'd perfected the art of occupying space without asserting himself, which I initially read as calm and eventually understood was something closer to long-practiced surrender. The first time Pamela met my parents, she was gracious in the way that wealthy people sometimes are with people they consider beneath them. Warmly, almost enthusiastically, with a slightly too loud voice and compliments that contained hidden measurements. "Oh, a home health aide, what important work." Said to my mother the way you'd say what a cute dog to someone whose dog you'd rather not touch. My father shook Pamela's hand and said, "Nice to meet you, Mrs. Haskell." And Pamela said, "Please, call me Pamela," and then spent the rest of the evening calling my father Ray with an inflection that somehow made his own name sound like it had a question mark attached. Owen said his mother just needed time to warm up. I kept that sentence in a drawer in the back of my mind, where I filed the other things I wasn't ready to examine. The engagement happened at a restaurant I'd never been to and wouldn't have chosen. Not because it wasn't beautiful, it was. All candlelight and aged wood and a wine list that had no prices next to anything. But because it was Pamela's suggestion and Owen had asked her opinion before asking mine, I said yes. The ring was extraordinary. I was in love with the man, genuinely and without reservation, and I thought, the parents are peripheral. The marriage is the point. That was my first real mistake, and I made it knowingly, which is the kind of mistake that's hardest to forgive yourself for later. Wedding planning started in January. The venue was the Haskell family's preferred club, a converted estate outside the city with manicured grounds and a reception hall that held 240 guests and cost approximately as much as a small car per hour. My parents' church on Griswold Street, where they'd been married 31 years earlier, was mentioned by my mother once and not mentioned again after Pamela said, "Oh, we have so many guests from out of town. We'd really need something with more capacity." The guest list. That was the second thing. The Haskell list came in at 112 people. My list was 64. When I pointed out the imbalance, Owen said his family had business relationships that made certain invitations effectively mandatory. I said I understood. I did understand. What I failed to say clearly enough was that understanding it didn't make it feel any less like my own wedding was being held in someone else's house. My mother suggested her deviled eggs as a past appetizer during cocktail hour. She made deviled eggs that people, real people, actual people who had eaten food before, would specifically request at family gatherings. She made them for funerals, and they became the thing people talked about afterward. Pamela said, "Helen has a wonderful shrimp program. I think we'll let the professionals handle it." She called my mother's recipe a shrimp program. My mother laughed it off. I watched her hands in her lap. I kept giving ground. Not because I was weak. I want to be clear about that. The way Fonda was clear about it. Just because women who choose their battles get called doormats when they're actually being strategic. I was calculating. I was telling myself, the venue is a building. The menu is food. The marriage is 30 years and beyond. Don't burn the relationship down over canapes. What I miscalculated was that Pamela wasn't testing the menu. She was testing me. Every time I yielded, she updated her model of how far I could be moved. By May, she knew exactly how far. June 7th, a Saturday. Warm enough to have the ceremony doors open to the garden, which was the one part of the day I'd actually asked for specifically, and which had been approved, so I walked into that morning feeling like I'd won something. I woke up in my childhood bedroom on Griswold Street. My mother had put a vase of peonies from the garden on the nightstand, My dress was on the closet door. Ivory crepe, tea length, not the ball gown Pamela had circled in a bridal magazine and left on my kitchen counter, but the dress I'd found in a small shop in the city and loved immediately and bought with my own money the day I saw it. My parents were dressed and ready by 9. My father in a charcoal suit. Not new, he'd worn it to my cousin's wedding 3 years ago, but dry cleaned and pressed and carrying that specific dignity of a man who takes care of the things he owns. My mother in a dusty blue dress she'd altered herself, taken in at the waist, added buttons at the cuff. She'd done her hair. She looked beautiful. She looked like my mother, which was the best version of beautiful there was. We drove to the venue together, the three of us and Margot, my best friend and maid of honor, one who had been quietly skeptical of the Haskell family for the better part of a year and had expressed it once, carefully, in the way that good friends deliver hard truths, directly, then dropped forever, because she respected my choices even when she questioned them. The venue was everything a venue like that is. Perfect in all the ways that cost money. White florals, gold-rimmed everything. A string quartet running through their warm-up in the garden. 200 guests expected, 112 from the Haskell side, 64 from mine, and a seating chart I had personally reviewed and approved 3 weeks prior. Table 1, Ray and June Connelly, Gerald and Pamela Haskell, Owen's grandmother Frances, and my Aunt Sylvie, who had flown in from Portland and was the closest thing I had to a second mother. 8 seats. Families of the couple, together, at the front. That was the arrangement. I slipped into the reception hall at 10:30 while guests were still arriving for cocktail hour on the terrace. Old nurse habit. I check things twice. I walked to table 1 and picked up the first place card. Douglas Haskell, Owen's uncle. I picked up the next. Catherine and Warren Haskell Moore, his cousins. I went through all 8 cards. All Haskells, business associates, club friends, people whose names I recognized from the guest list, but who had not been assigned to this table 3 weeks ago when I signed off on the final chart. My parents were not there. I moved through the room, methodically, table by table. The Haskell cousins were at 2, their business associates at 3 and 4, my college friends at 11, my colleagues from the pediatric ward at 12, table 16, against the back wall, beside the door that the catering staff used to move food from the service corridor to the main room. The door had a pneumatic hinge that swung it closed with a soft thud approximately every 90 seconds during service. 2 padded folding chairs, 2 regular chairs, a table that was slightly smaller than the others because it was the fill-in table, the one venues add when the count runs over. A candle arrangement that was noticeably less elaborate than the ones in the center of the room because the florist's budget was probably front-loaded. Ray Connelly, June Connelly. I held those 2 place cards in my hand for a moment. Then I put them face down on the table. I found the wedding coordinator, a woman named Bev who worked for the venue and had been professional and pleasant during every prior interaction. Who changed the seating chart? She didn't quite meet my eyes. Mrs. Haskell called this morning. She said the arrangements had been updated and you'd been notified. I was not notified. I'm sorry, Dara, she said. It's not your error. I handed her the place cards. Where is Owen? The groomsmen's suite was on the north side of the building, down a corridor lined with framed photos of previous events at the venue, weddings, galas, charity dinners, decades of well-dressed people smiling in this same building. I walked past all of them. I knocked. One of the groomsmen opened the door, smiled, started to say something about how I wasn't supposed to see the groom. I walked in anyway. Owen was at the mirror. He looked perfect, the way he always looked. The kind of man whose appearance suggests he'd arrived in the world pre-assembled. He turned when he heard me, and his expression cycled through something before it settled on calm. That cycling was what I noticed. A man who was genuinely surprised by my presence would have looked surprised. He looked like a man who'd been waiting for this conversation and had been hoping it would go a different way. Your mother moved my parents to table 16. She adjusted a few things this morning. It was a logistics issue. Owen. Table 16 is next to the service door. There were people who needed to be at the front. Business contacts. People your dad and mom wouldn't know. It made more sense to... My parents paid $11,000 toward this wedding. He was quiet for a second. Just a second. I know that, and we're grateful. Don't say we're grateful. Do not say that to me. He took a step toward me, hand extended, the gesture of a man attempting to contain something before it spreads. Dara, we have 200 guests outside, and an hour until we sit down. Can we please just get through the day and I'll fix the seating after dinner? After dinner, my parents will have spent 3 hours at the back of the room next to the kitchen. They won't mind. Your dad is easygoing. That is not the point. My voice was steady, steadier than I felt. The point is that someone decided my parents don't belong at the front of their daughter's wedding, and I want to know if you agree with that. He looked at me, long enough that I had my answer before he said anything. Fonda, there are people out there who... He called me Fonda. He used the wrong name entirely, which told me exactly how scattered he was, and also that this wasn't the first time this morning he'd been having some version of this conversation. Go back to getting ready, I said. I'll talk to you in a few minutes. I left. The door didn't close all the way behind me. I was halfway down the corridor when I heard Pamela's voice. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I want to say that clearly because it matters. I was walking toward the exit and she was already in the room, and the door was ajar, and her voice carried the way voices carry when a person has spent their whole life in large rooms and never learned to modulate for small ones. Owen, I saw her face. You need to handle this before she does something. She's upset about the table. She needs to understand what today is. The Hendersons are out there. The Beckers. These are people who have been part of this family for 20 years. I know, Mom. Your father finalized the Northbrook deal last week. Douglas flew in from Atlanta. I cannot have them sitting in the back while... A pause. Owen, look at her parents. Her father is wearing a suit that's at least 8 years old. Her mother altered her own dress. I'm not being unkind, I'm being honest. I know. These are lovely people. Simple people. But they are not the same as our guests. And you know that. And putting them at the front sends a message we cannot afford to send on a day when this many important people are watching. You're right. Those 2 words. Not. Mom. They're Dara's parents. Not. They saved $11,000 so there would be food at our wedding. Not. My wife-to-be is standing outside this door and she came to me because she needed me to fix this. Just, you're right. I pressed my hand against the corridor wall and held it there. I'd spent 2 years explaining away the Pamela things, the way she'd looked at my mother's casserole dish at Christmas like it was a hazmat situation, and the way she'd introduced me at the club as Owen's friend from the hospital 6 months into our engagement. The way she'd once asked, in a voice like she was being generous, if my parents had thought about taking a vacation now that I was settled. As if the natural endpoint of my existence was to be settled and off their hands. I'd explained all of it. Made it smaller, made it bearable, gave it the benefit of every available doubt. But I was standing in a corridor and I had just heard my fiancé agree that my parents, Ray and June Connelly, 31 years of showing up, of soup when I was sick, and drives through snowstorms and a suit saved for 6 months and a dress worked on for 3 weekends, were not the same as their guests. Not the same. Not worth table 1. Something went very quiet inside me. Not anger. I want to describe it accurately because anger is reactive, and what I felt was the opposite of reactive. I felt the specific stillness of a person who has just had the last piece of information they needed to make a decision they'd been approaching for a long time. I pushed off the wall and walked down the corridor. I found Margot near the entrance to the garden, champagne in hand, watching the guests filter through. She turned when she heard my heels on the stone floor, and I watched her read my face in about half a second. "Tell me," she said. I told her. Table 16, the service door. Owen's non-answer. What I'd heard through the gap. Margot had been my closest friend for 9 years. She was an attorney. Estate law, which is not as dramatic as it sounds, except when it is. And she had a mind that operated like a very precise instrument. When I finished, she didn't express outrage or tell me what she thought I should do, or ask how I was feeling. She stood for a moment in that focused quiet of hers. "The license," she said. "What?" "The marriage license." "When are you signing it?" I knew what she meant immediately. Pamela had wanted the signing made into a moment. The couple at the sweetheart table during dessert, the photographer capturing it, a very staged piece of theater. "After dinner," I said. "At the sweetheart table. So you haven't signed it yet?" "No." "Then nothing is legal." She said it simply. "The ceremony is symbolic until you sign that paper. You could walk through every ritual today, and it would not constitute a marriage until the license is signed, witnessed, and filed with the county recorder." I absorbed this. "I'm not telling you what to do," she said. "I'm just telling you what's true." "I know." I looked at the garden, at the 200 people with their champagne and their name tags, at the flowers and the string quartet and the $85,000 of flawless execution that was about to become someone's memory of their perfect day. I need to see my parents first. My father was at table 16 with his jacket buttoned and his back straight. That's how Ray Connelly sat when he was uncomfortable. Perfectly upright, chin level, as if his posture alone could make the situation dignified. My mother was beside him with her hands folded in her lap. The service door swung open behind them, releasing a burst of heat and kitchen noise, and she flinched slightly. Dad looked up when he saw me coming. He smiled. The specific smile he produced for occasions when he wanted to spare me from something. "Hey, sweetheart. You look beautiful." "Dad, I'm sorry." "Don't start." He said it gently, but absolutely. "I can sit anywhere. You know I don't care about that." "I know you don't." I crouched down beside his chair so we were at eye level. That's exactly why it's not okay that this happened. My mother put her hand on my arm. "Dara, don't make trouble on our account." I looked at both of them, at my father's one good suit and my mother's 3 weekends at the sewing machine, at the service door swinging behind them, thud, thud, like a clock counting down. "I'm not making trouble," I said. "I'm finishing it." My mother's hand tightened on my arm. My father studied my face the way he'd studied it for 30 years, looking for what I wasn't saying. "Fonda," he said quietly. He used his old name for me, the one from childhood, and I felt it in my sternum. "Whatever you're thinking about doing, make sure you're doing it for yourself, not for us. We're fine. We have always been fine. I know you have." I stood. That's not actually the point. I walked toward the reception hall. The cocktail hour was winding down. Guests were beginning to move inside, finding their seats. The soft, organized drift of 200 people following arrows. The string quartet shifted from their standing repertoire to something more ceremonial. The room was everything it was supposed to be. I stood at the edge of it for maybe 30 seconds. Then I walked to the stage. The stage was a low platform at the far end of the room, elevated about 18 inches, with a microphone stand and a podium, and a sweetheart table behind it, where Owen and I were supposed to sit during dinner. Derek, a fraternity friend of Owen's who was emceeing, was checking his notes at the podium. He saw me coming and stepped back with a reflexive grin, The kind people produce when they don't know what's happening, but assume it's supposed to be happening. I took the microphone. The room took about 45 seconds to go fully quiet. It happened in waves. The tables closest to the stage first, then the middle section, then the far corners as people nudged each other and pointed. 200 people, 200 different expressions, all of them resolving into the same question. Good evening. My voice came back at me from the speakers, even and clear. 7 years in a pediatric ward will do that for you. You learn to speak calmly when everything around you is not. Thank you for being here. I know you came tonight to celebrate a wedding, and I owe you honesty about what's been happening in this room. The quiet that settled was the specific kind where you can hear individual things. A glass being set down. Someone's chair. The service door in the back. Thud. Most of you know me as Owen's fiancé. But before I was that, and after tonight I still will be, I'm Ray and June Connelly's daughter. I look toward the back of the room. My parents are at table 16. I'd like you to find it. 200 heads turned. Some slowly, some immediately. The motion moved through the room like a current. I watched them find it. The back corner, the service door, the folding chairs. I watched the math happen on their faces. The distance between table 16 and table 1. The distance between where my parents were sitting and where the Haskell family had arranged itself at the front. I watched the understanding arrive, table by table, face by face. 3 weeks ago, I said, the seating chart placed my parents at table 1 with both families. That's where the families of the couple sit at a wedding. This morning, someone changed it. My parents were moved to the last table in the building, next to the service entrance, without my knowledge and without my consent. I let that sit. Pamela was at table 1. I could see her from the stage, back straight, expression arranged into something careful and still. Owen beside her, Gerald looking at the tablecloth. The person who made that change is Owen's mother, Pamela Haskell. A sound moved through the room. Not loud. Just the collective breath of 200 people recalibrating. When I confronted Owen, he told me it wasn't a big deal and that we'd address it after dinner. And then, through a door that wasn't fully closed, I heard him tell his mother. I kept my voice level, factual, the way I read medication dosages. That she was right. That my parents were simple people. That they were not the same as their guests. And that putting them at the front would send the wrong message. Owen stood up. Dara, that's... Sit down, Owen. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. And you had multiple opportunities today to stand up for my family. You chose not to. I'm not asking you to defend yourself right now. I'm just telling these people what happened. He stayed on his feet for a moment. Then Pamela put her hand on his arm and he sat back down. And that action, that one gesture, told the room everything it needed to know about the dynamic I'd been living inside. My father, Ray Connelly, I said, has worked maintenance for the county school district for 31 years. He has fixed every broken thing in every school building in this county. Boilers and pipes and roofs and electrical panels, the things that keep children warm and safe and in buildings that don't fall down. He is wearing the best suit he owns. He pressed it himself this morning. A woman at table 7 pressed her fingers to her mouth. My mother, June, has been a home health aide for 23 years. She goes into people's homes when they're frightened and struggling and unable to take care of themselves, and she treats them like they're her own family. She altered her own dress for tonight. She worked on it for 3 weekends. I looked at my parents at the back of the room. My father was sitting perfectly straight, hands flat on the table, eyes on me. My mother's face was wet. She wasn't trying to hide it. These two people put $11,000 into this wedding. They saved it over 14 years. That money is in the food you're eating, in the wine in your glasses, In every single thing on every table in this room, including table 1. I let the silence do its work. Pamela Haskell put the people who paid for dinner next to the place where the dirty dishes come out. And the room broke open. Not dramatically, not gasps and shouts, but in the specific way a room breaks when something true has been said in it, and everyone is deciding what to do with what they just heard. People looked at their plates. People looked at each other. I saw one of the Haskell business associates lean away from Gerald in a way that created about 4 inches of meaningful distance. Jim Becker, who I knew from Owen's descriptions was his father's most significant current client, turned to his wife and said something quiet. She looked at table 1, then at the back of the room, then back at table 1. "I came here today," I said, "to start a life with someone. A partnership. A family." I paused. "But I cannot sign my name to a marriage where my family is seated near the garbage so that business contacts have a better view of the dance floor. I won't raise children in a household where that's what love looks like." The room was absolutely still. To everyone here from my side, thank you for coming. Thank you for the drives and the department store dresses and not knowing what a charger plate is. You're my people, and I'm proud of you. I looked at table 1 one final time. To the Haskell family, I genuinely wish you well. But Owen made his choice today, and it wasn't me. I unpinned my veil, folded it twice, the way my mother had taught me to fold things, with care, regardless of the circumstances. Set it on the edge of the podium. Then I put the microphone back in the stand, quietly, without drama. The way you put a thing down when you're finished with it. The walk from the stage to table 16 was 60 feet. My heels on the hardwood, clear and steady. Every step. Nobody spoke. My father stood when I reached him. He didn't say anything. He just opened his arms, and I walked into them. And he held on the way he'd held on for every hard thing since I was old enough to understand what hard things were. My mother stood too, and then her arms were around both of us, and the 3 of us stood there between the folding chairs and the service door, while 200 people sat in complete silence. Margot appeared beside me with my coat and my bag. She'd had them ready. Of course she had. "Cars outside," she said. We walked out. The 4 of us, down the side aisle, past the dessert station, past the quartet which had stopped playing, past 200 people who had turned in their chairs to watch. Behind us, I heard Pamela's voice, sharp and controlled. The voice of a woman refusing to lose the room even as it was leaving her. "She's being hysterical. Owen, go after her." Owen's footsteps on the floor. "Dara. Dara, wait." I didn't wait. The doors opened onto the evening air and we walked through them and they swung closed behind us, and the last sound from inside was the muffled, confused noise of 200 people with a lot to say to each other. The kitchen table on Griswold Street was the same one I'd done homework on since the 3rd grade. Formica top with a chip in one corner from a dropped cast iron skillet. Chrome legs. A light overhead that buzzed when it needed a new bulb, which it apparently always did. My mother made tea. My father sat across from me and didn't say anything, which was how he communicated the most important things. Margot sat beside me with her laptop open, going through the documents she'd already started pulling together. At 9:45, she looked up. The license was never signed. I confirmed with Bev. She has the original in her bag. "Dara, legally, you were never married. Not for a single minute. No annulment, no divorce, no court process. Nothing was ever filed." I exhaled. "Owen has no claim to your apartment, your accounts, nothing. Your assets were separate going in, and they remain separate." My father wrapped his hands around his mug. "And the baby? Dad?" I'm asking. I looked at him. "I don't know yet." His face didn't change. He reached across the table and put his hand over mine, rough-palmed, warm. the hand that had fixed every broken thing in every school building in this county for 31 years. He held on. 2 weeks later, I took a test. I'd suspected for about a week. The kind of suspicion you talk yourself out of because the timing is catastrophically bad, and you're not ready, and the father just watched his mother put you next to the garbage and agreed it was appropriate. Positive. I sat on the bathroom floor on Griswold Street for a long time. Not crying exactly. More the particular stillness that comes before crying, when your mind is doing the arithmetic of a situation that is going to require everything you have. My mother found me. She came in for towels, saw the test, and sat down on the cold tile without a word. Her knees were bad. She sat down anyway. "You're not alone," she said. "You have never been alone." I know that, in the abstract, is something mothers say. But my mother meant it in the specific material sense. She meant, I will physically be present. I will sit on this floor. I will rearrange my schedule. I will show up. She meant it the way she'd always meant things. As a fact, not a comfort. I leaned into her and let her hold me. "Your father," she said after a while, "is going to need to be told carefully." "I know. He loves you so much he's going to try to fix it and there's nothing to fix." "I know. So we'll have to let him build something. Give him a project." "The apartment?" I said. "I'm going to need a better apartment?" My mother's arms tightened around me. Then she said quietly, and in the voice she used when she was actually about to laugh, "He's going to build that baby an entire room." She was right about that. I told Owen by email, reviewed word for word by Margot before I sent it. 3 sentences. "I'm pregnant. I intend to keep the baby. If you choose to pursue parental rights, all communication will be conducted through legal counsel." His responses came in 3 waves, the way they always do with men who haven't decided yet who they want to be. The first email was conciliatory. "Come home, we can work through this. I love you." The second was threatening. "My family has resources. You should consider your position carefully." The third arrived at midnight and said I was making the worst mistake of my life. 3 different men in 3 different emails. All from someone who couldn't hold a position for 6 hours on the day it counted most. Pamela called the house. Dad answered. I was in the kitchen doorway watching. "Mr. Connelly," she said, in the carefully measured voice of a woman who was used to controlling conversations. "This child is a Haskell. I trust you understand what that means in terms of—" "Mrs. Haskell," my father said. "My daughter has a lawyer. Call her." He put the phone down gently, picked up his coffee, went back to his crossword. Margot connected me with a custody attorney named Diana Walsh out of Indianapolis. Diana had the specific energy of a woman who had heard every variation of this situation and was not impressed by any of them. Ohio courts. Oh, Indiana courts. Prioritize the primary caregiver. Your employment history is stable. Your support network is documented and present. His family's financial resources are relevant for support calculations but not for custody determinations. She looked at me over her glasses. File. Don't wait. We filed. The fallout from the wedding unfolded over the following weeks in the quiet way that social consequences tend to. Not in explosions, but in the gradual withdrawal of things that had previously been offered without question. I learned about Jim Becker through Margot, who heard it through Diana, who had a colleague whose husband was adjacent to the Haskell business circle. Becker had called Gerald the Monday after the wedding and withdrawn from a development project they'd been partnering on for 14 months. The stated reason was vague. Timing, priorities, a recalibration of commitments. The real reason was that Becker had watched Gerald sit perfectly still while his wife was publicly identified as the person who'd moved the bride's parents next to the service entrance, and had decided that a man who couldn't handle that moment with any dignity was not a man he wanted handling millions of dollars of shared investment. Gerald had to find a replacement investor. The project stalled. Pamela had chaired the city's annual Historic Preservation Gala for 4 years. She was very good at it. Organized, well-connected, genuinely effective at raising money from people who had it to give. 3 weeks after the wedding, the board chair called and asked if she'd consider stepping into an advisory role this year, given everything the family was navigating. The kind of ask that has only one possible answer. The gala happened in September. Her name was not on the program. I didn't do any of this. I want to be completely clear about that. I did not call Becker. I did not contact the gala board. I did not post on social media. I blocked Owen, Pamela, and Gerald on every platform, and I did not look back. 200 people watched Pamela Haskell decide that a plumber and a home health aide were table 16 people, and 200 people went home and talked about it, and consequences have their own momentum when enough people are paying attention. Owen came to Griswold Street on a Thursday afternoon 6 weeks after the wedding. I was upstairs. I heard the knock, then my father's voice. Owen. Mr. Connelly, I'd like to speak to Dara, if she's willing. She told you to go through the lawyers. I know what she said. I wanted to say this in person. I should have handled things differently. I should have told my mother to put the seating chart back, and I didn't. And I'm standing here because I need Dara to know that I know that. I stood at the top of the stairs and listened. My father was quiet for a moment. I could picture him exactly. Standing in the doorway, not crossing his arms, not blocking with his body, just present, filling the space the way he always had. Owen, he said, I believe you mean that. I do. But meaning something and doing something are different kinds of things. You had a chance to do something and you didn't take it. My daughter gave you the chance herself. She came to you and asked you to fix it, and you told her to wait until after dinner. A pause. So I can't let you in to apologize to her. That's not the right order for things. Mr. Connelly. The lawyer has the paperwork for the child. That's the road now. That's where you go from here. My father's voice was not unkind. This was the thing about Ray Connelly that people who hadn't known him long sometimes didn't understand. He could hold a boundary without cruelty. He could close a door without slamming it. I'm not keeping you from anything you've earned. I'm keeping you from things you haven't. A silence. Then Owen's footsteps on the porch steps. His car starting. The sound of it leaving. My father came inside and closed the door. At dinner, he passed the bread and asked me what I wanted to name the baby if it was a girl. I found an apartment 4 blocks from Griswold Street. Second floor, 1 bedroom, with a small second room that could be converted. The carpet was beige and the kitchen had exactly 1 counter, and there was a radiator that clanked for 20 minutes every morning like it was working something out. It was mine. My father showed up on the first Saturday with his toolbox. He fixed the kitchen faucet, which had a slow drip. He replaced the shower head. He looked at the second room for a long time, measuring things with his eyes the way he'd been doing for 30 years, and then he came back the following Saturday with wood from a reclaimed barn out in Hendricks County, old oak, dense and warm-colored. And he built a changing table and a set of shelves that fit the wall exactly. He carved a small groove along the edge of the top shelf. No name yet. Just a notch where one would go. My mother sewed curtains for every window. Yellow cotton for the nursery, white for the bedroom, a blue gingham in the kitchen that made the 1 counter look intentional. My charge nurse Patricia rearranged my schedule in the final trimester without being asked. You covered for me during my knee surgery, she said. This is nothing. She brought food to the apartment twice a week for the last 2 months. Casseroles and soups in containers she didn't expect returned, and she knocked and left them on the mat without waiting to be let in, because she understood that sometimes the best version of kindness is the kind that doesn't require you to perform gratitude. I won't make this sound easier than it was. There were nights I sat on the kitchen floor and cried, not from regret, never from regret, but from the weight of it, the 2 a.m. back pain, with no one to get water. The anatomy ultrasound where the technician asked brightly if Dad was parking the car. The Saturday afternoons that were quiet in the way apartments are quiet when they're built for more people than they contain. I chose this. I would choose it again. Choosing the right thing doesn't eliminate the cost of it. The cost is real, and it's worth naming. My daughter arrived on a Tuesday in February at 6:41 in the morning. 7 pounds, 4 ounces, brown eyes, dark hair, a cry that made the delivery nurse laugh and say she'd heard smaller adults make less noise. She was healthy and furious and absolutely herself from the first second. I named her Rosie June. June for my mother, obviously. Rose because when I was sick as a child, my mother used to put a single stem in a glass on my nightstand and say flowers made rooms feel less like sick rooms. I wanted her to have something that meant the people who raised me knew how to make hard things bearable. My father held her first, after me and the nurses. He stood at the window in the pale February light with this 7-pound person in his rough-palmed hands, and he didn't say anything for a long time. My mother photographed all of it. I counted later. 53 photos in the first hour. The custody arrangement was formalized in family court in October. Owen gets Rosie every other weekend. He shows up on time, every time, which I give him full credit for. He's quieter than he used to be, more careful. There's something in the way he handles her. Deliberate, attentive, like he's trying to earn something he knows he forfeited a chance at. That is sad in an honest way, and I've let myself feel that sadness without letting it become doubt. Pamela is not part of the arrangement. Not because I legally excluded her, I didn't, but because I set one condition. Any visit with extended family requires my presence or my parents' supervision. Pamela called this punitive. I called it a boundary. She has not met Rosie. The door is technically unlocked. She simply won't walk through it on terms that aren't her own. Gerald sent a letter. Handwritten, heavy stationery, no return address, but I knew the handwriting from Owen's Christmas cards. It said, Dara. I was in the room when the seating chart was changed. I saw it happen, and I said nothing. That is something I will carry for a long time. I'm not asking for access to my granddaughter or your forgiveness. I'm only asking you to know that I understand what I didn't do, and that it has cost me more than I expected. I read it twice. Put it in the nightstand drawer next to Rosie's hospital bracelet. I haven't responded. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I'm not making that decision from a place of anger. I genuinely don't feel anger about it anymore, which took longer than I expected, and arrived quieter than I thought it would. I'm making it from a place of care. I don't yet know who Gerald is underneath the version of himself that stood in a room and watched his wife humiliate my parents and said nothing. I'd need more evidence than a letter. And I've learned, finally, to wait for evidence before deciding what something means. Sunday dinners on Griswold Street happen every week. Same table I grew up at, formica top with the chip in the corner. 6 chairs, none of them matching. My father's wooden rocker that he refinished from a yard sale. My mother's chair with the cushion she crocheted in 2004. My folding chair from the garage, the good padded one. Last Sunday, my parents, Margot and her partner Thomas, Patricia with her pie that she claims is a byproduct of baking too much and that nobody believes, and Rosie in my father's lap pulling at his glasses while he pretended not to notice. No place cards, no charger plates, no string quartet. My mother made the deviled eggs, the recipe that got cut from my wedding menu for not being professional enough, and they were gone in 12 minutes. And Patricia asked for the recipe, and my mother wrote it out on a paper towel because that's how she gives recipes, and Patricia folded it into her pocket like it was something valuable. The overhead light buzzed a little. My father said he'd fix it next week. The wallpaper in the hallway was peeling at the seam. There was a draft from the back door that my mother sealed with a rolled towel from November to March. Every year, same towel. No champagne, no crystal, no $85,000 of perfect. Every person at that table chose to be there. Every person belongs. Nobody is sitting next to anything they shouldn't have to sit next to. My father looked up from Rosie at one point and caught me looking at him. He raised his coffee mug slightly, the Connelly version of a toast, and went back to his granddaughter. Your grandpa, he was telling her, in the quiet voice he used for important things, fixed a lot of broken things in this city. Kept a lot of buildings standing. Nobody ever put a plaque up about it, but the buildings are still there, so. Rosie grabbed his finger. Yeah, he said. That's about right. I'm not going to tell you there's a lesson here, because I'm suspicious of stories that close too cleanly into wisdom. Real things are messier than that. What I can tell you is what I know from the other side of it. I know that the people who assign your seat are often telling you exactly who they are, not what they think of you, what they think of themselves. Pamela moved my parents because she needed my parents to be smaller than her guests. That need had nothing to do with Ray and June Connelly. It was entirely about Pamela Haskell, about what she required in order to feel like the room was correctly ordered. My parents' dignity was just the material she used. I know that the person you marry is not only the person they are with you. They're also the person they are when someone they love asks them to do something hard. Owen was kind to me in private, in ordinary time, in the smooth, uncomplicated parts of a relationship. When it mattered, when I came to him and said, "Fix this right now, it's important," he chose the easier version. He chose to wait until after dinner. And that choice told me more about who he was than 3 years of open doors and remembered details. I know that standing up for your family doesn't require a microphone or a reception hall or 200 witnesses. It just requires knowing, clearly and without confusion, that the people you came from deserve to be in the room, not in the back, in the room. And I know this in a specific, cellular way now, that a table where everyone belongs is not about the number of matching chairs or the quality of the light fixture or the absence of a clanking radiator. It's about who sits at it, who showed up, who chose to be there. My table is a Formica top with a chip in the corner on Griswold Street. It is the only table one I have ever needed. My name is Dara Connelly. I'm 30 years old. I'm a pediatric nurse and a shift lead and a mother, and I am Ray and June Connelly's daughter in every way that word has ever meant anything. I have a one-bedroom apartment with beige carpet and a bookshelf my father built from barn oak. My daughter laughs like she invented the concept of laughing. She pulls glasses off people's faces and throws spoons on the floor, and has never once in her 11 months of life sat anywhere she didn't belong. If you're somewhere in a situation like the one I was in, if there's a version of Table 16 in your life, a place or a relationship or a room where someone has decided you fit better near the door than near the front, I want to say one thing to you. The people who put you there were not measuring your worth. They were protecting their own discomfort. Those are very different things, and only one of them is about you. You're allowed to take the microphone. You're allowed to fold the veil. You're allowed to walk out past 200 people and get into the car and go to the kitchen table where you grew up. Because that table has more real in it than any gilded chair in any room that required you to make yourself smaller to sit in it. You're allowed to be exactly where you come from, fully and without apology. That's all I know. That's everything.